Good morning. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. Joining us today are former Republican State Senator Phil Harriman and longtime progressive Democratic activist and lobbyist Betsy Sweet. Good morning on this chilly weekend.
Good morning to everyone.
This week, the Maine Republican Party found an opening to go after Governor Mills on taxes. They're focused on a rule that would require Maine businesses to pay state income tax on federal Paycheck Protection Program loans, which are not taxed by the federal government. The Mills administration says the state could face a $100 million shortfall if it were to go along with those changes to the federal tax code. But now the governor says she's looking for some federal funds to offset the loss so businesses wouldn't have to pay. Phil, clearly the administration is feeling the heat here. Did she make a big political blunder with this budget proposal?
I think this is indicative of what many governors do to close the budget gap, so to speak. They are required by Constitution to submit a balanced budget to the legislature. And then the legislature, all 186 of them, get to weigh in on how it ultimately is balanced and sent back to her for her signature. So, yeah, this one was a hot potato, so to speak, but clearly, if you look at the amount of additional spending that Governor Mills has persuaded the legislature to approve since she took office, and the amount of money that came out of Washington during the COVID pandemic, finding $100 million to cut of expenses shouldn't be that difficult.
What do you think, Betsy?
Yeah, I'm not with you there, Phil. I mean, I think
surprise.
I think that, first of all, that she put a budget in with no revenue increases at a time when we really need them because there's so many people hurting is amazing. And then to find this loophole and then say this is a problem, everyone who got a PPP loan, it said directly in the information that you got, this will be taxed on the state level. So people know it going forward. I think we could do some more to target businesses that are really suffering that need help and businesses that could easily pay that tax. I think we have to do a little bit of that more careful sculpting. But I think also this idea that anything that she would say, they're going to turn into a tax and they're going to make it seem like she's going after this. This only spending increases in this budget are ones for vaccines and for getting people, those are the only places where we're seeing big increases in the budget. And that's because of the pandemic. So I don't think this is a fair one on the part of the Republicans.
But Betsy, we know how these things work in a campaign, even though it's 2 years away. They're going to keep saying, even before the pandemic, the governor was spending too much. And look, now she's not supporting small businesses. That fits on a bumper sticker or in a commercial.
Right. And that's why we're in the trouble we're in, I think. It's because we take the littlest things and we try and make them into a political score, a big scoreboard, instead of what is it that we need as a state. And I've said before on the show that spending is countercyclical, right? We need to spend more money when we trouble, when we don't have as much. And so we have to figure out how to make that work. And I think she's done a damn good job.
Phil, does this play into a legitimate narrative for Republicans as they run for election in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it does. And the rationale that I would offer is that there were 23,000 small businesses in Maine that accessed the payroll protection loan. So what the governor is saying in this budget is that this $100 million of spending, I want to be paid for by just those very few small business people who needed the loans in the first place to keep their employees on the payroll.
All right, let's shift our attention to Washington. Senator Susan Collins was one of just 5 Republican senators who voted not to dismiss the impeachment trial on constitutional grounds. She says, quote, there's no possibility of conviction if you have 45 Republicans believing the trial itself is unconstitutional. And she says the question is there another way to express condemnation of the president's activities with regard to the riot and the pressure that he put on state officials? Now, Senator Collins and Virginia Democrat Tim Kaine have been looking to see if there is support for a censure instead of a trial. Betsy, let me ask you first. Is that a good idea?
I understand that we're not going to win this impeachment, but I think that the process of it, I think that the impeachment and actually Donald Trump himself is only the very top of the iceberg of the problems that we are facing. And I think, unfortunately, a censure just sort of continues the dismissal that the Republicans have done for the last 4 years of the very serious problems, and actually before that, of the very serious problems that we have with violent people. People think that violence is the answer, from the QAnon to not just the QAnon, but to other people. And I think that we have to know to what extent was the president, the former president, and members of Congress, to what extent were they involved in this insurrection that completely was about taking down our democracy?
So, Phil, even if there's no conviction, is it worth having that discussion on the record for now and for future generations to see?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's really what Susan Collins was trying to express, is that I'm not going to let this trial, this opportunity to investigate through the Senate slip through our fingers. But it's clear that he's not going to be, convicted. So let's get the rest of the story, including Donald Trump. He owes an explanation in detail to the American public about what happened. And I would agree with Betsy. We've gotten to a place in our country where if you don't like what's going on politically, there's riots. And whether it's Black Lives Matters or Antifa or marching on the state capitol, we all got to take a breath and sit down.
And we've been told by the Department of Homeland Security, there's a terrorism advisory saying domestic extremists have been emboldened by the Capitol insurrection. So clearly there's reason for concern in Washington.
No question about it. And I would add to that the FBI and other national security apparatus wouldn't be putting that message out there if they didn't have a tangible proof that there's reason for us to be on alert.
Yeah, I think it's very concerning. And, and the fact that Homeland Security took that step, that's not something that they do lightly. So there is continuing stuff going on. And I think whatever process we use to expose and to make sure, lay bare to the public and to ourselves what's actually going on, I don't think we know the half of it.
Happening for one of our members of the congressional delegation, pretty big deal. Representative Shelley Pingree is the new chair of a House Appropriations Subcommittee, which holds the purse strings for a wide range of federal environmental, land use, arts, and tribal affairs agencies and programs. Betsy, what is this going to mean for Maine?
Oh, I think this is huge for Maine and for Shelley, obviously. I think that to be, the way the Appropriations Committee works is that these subcommittees really run the agenda of the Appropriations Committee. So if you look at how much work she's done on farming and agriculture and all the things that affect the interior here in the state of Maine, it is going to be incredible opportunity for her to actually get policies that will help Maine and also will help the country. She's really working hard on the connection between agriculture and climate change, ways we can really impact climate change just through agricultural policies. This is a huge opportunity, and I'm so proud of her, and I'm so happy for the state of Maine. I think it's going to make a big difference.
What do you think, Phil?
Oh, I think Betsy's spot on. This is just a hand-in-glove opportunity for Maine. All of the areas that this subcommittee oversees is a very important part of Maine's culture and our economy, and we're lucky that we have that opportunity to be heard on these issues.
This week, the American Lung Association gave Maine mixed grades on tobacco control. The biggest failures they cite are failing to stop the sale of flavored tobaccos, which can appeal to young people, and the fact that Maine has not raised its tobacco tax in 16 years. Phil, should lawmakers and the administration hike the tobacco tax right now?
Well, it is clear that taxation influences behavior, and that was frankly Angus King's rationale for raising the tax in his administration. I guess if people feel like if we raise the tax high enough, people won't consume the product, then that's probably the direction that they will want to go in. But I would submit to you, we had a huge tobacco settlement program when I was in the Senate in the last century. And what has it done to eradicate smoking? It's a personal choice and a personal responsibility. Everyone understands smoking is not healthy.
Of course, they still have that settlement money that they use for cessation programs. However, the landscape has changed because of young people in particular who are vaping. They'd given up cigarettes. Now they pick that up. Betsy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that the settlement funds have done an incredible job. What's changed is the tobacco industry, right? So when tobacco started to be the thing and we all knew not to do that, they introduced vaping and they introduced flavored vaping. So you can now have strawberry vape or a lime vape, and they're spending millions of dollars in Maine and across the country to target those young people to get them interested and excited. And there's legislation this session to eliminate, to disallow any flavored tobacco products and to increase the tax, because taxing the product is the number one thing that impacts behavior, especially with young people. So this is a lifetime addiction. So I think it's a really important piece that we should pay attention to, because it's epidemic in Maine. And you see kids in the 5th and 6th grade now walking around vaping. And those flavors, so the tobacco industry, when they were losing on cigarettes, they just pivoted to something else. And so I think it's time to take it into our own hands.
Turning to the new administration in Washington, President Biden issued a record number of executive orders in the first 10 days of his presidency. Phil, what's the message that he's sending here?
Several. The most important one is for those of you who were concerned about the direction of the Trump administration. I've taken my pen and yanked us right back to where we were before, and the opportunity to revitalize or invigorate Obama-era policies are also at the top of the agenda. You've seen literally in about a 2-week span a tremendous shift in public policy with the stroke of a pen.
Is that a good way to do business?
I think not, frankly. I think that's why we have the legislative process. But what we've learned, particularly in the Bush and Obama era, is that if you didn't like the pace in which Washington legislates, just take out your pen and claim it's an executive responsibility, and therefore I can do it.
What do you think of the message, Betsy?
I think it is partly frustration with how Washington is working. I think he's only addressed those issues that are really critical: climate change, kids in cages, healthcare, the vaccine, things that are really cutting edge that he really can't wait for us to, for the legislature to act. But I also think it's a message to Mitch McConnell and the Republicans to say, if you are going to do what you did the last 4 years and just absolutely stop every single piece of legislation that goes to the things that people really want and they're clamoring for, then watch it, because we have other things at our disposal. And I'm hoping that it's going to be used to bring the Republican Party and Mitch McConnell back to the negotiating table so we can have the legislature work like it should. But until then, I think this is the way he has to do it. I don't think he wants to do it this way, but I don't think he has a choice.
All right, finally, let's look at our winners and losers in politics this week. Betsy, we'll start with you today.
President Biden is a winner this week. I think degree of seriousness, which he's dealing with the pandemic and doing some of these executive orders on some of the most egregious things, I think is absolutely the way to go. And so I'm really proud of him and where we are. I think the losers are the members of Congress who are refusing to call Trump and the protesters to task, and the people inside the building who are wanting to bring guns inside and are, threatening their own other colleagues. I think those are the losers, not just for them, but for our democracy.
And Phil, what have you got?
Well, this is going to be an interesting one. The loser of the week, in my view, is Governor Mills for choosing to single out 23,000 small business owners to balance the budget of $100 million. And my winner of the week is Governor Mills for lifting the restriction on restaurants and their hours, giving them an opportunity to hopefully get back in the game, so to speak.
So she's batting 500 this week for you. All right, Phil Harriman. Phil Harriman and Betsy Sweet, thanks so much for being with us.
Welcome.
We thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Political Brew. News Center Maine is back after this.